The one-handed backhand versus the two-handed backhand. That's a question that people are asked all the time. A famous story, a true story in tennis, Percy Rosberg, and I may be mispronouncing the name, famous Swedish coach. He coached Bjorn Borg and he coached Stefan Edberg. They both, as youngsters, had a two-handed backhand. Rosberg did not change Borg. He kept Borg as a two-hander, but he changed Edberg. And the question is why? Well, Borg was more of a backcourt player, opposed to Edberg, who was charging and going forward. The one-handed backhand is a much more versatile shot. It's not, to me, it's not that one is better than the other. You certainly could say, well, on the return of serve, the two-handed backhand is going to win more votes than the one-handed backhand. But for a varied approach shot, the one-handed backhand would win more votes than the two-hander. But what's so important is that youngsters are taught to hit, if they are taught two-handed, they're taught to hit with a racket up high, they're taught to hit with a backhand grip, and they're taught to hit with their arm straight. If you look at film of young Pete Sampras, he had a very efficient two-handed backhand. So, granted, it's very difficult to change, but it's going to be more difficult if players are hitting a two-handed backhand with a forehand grip, racket face low, collapsed wrist, horizontal pull. Now, Justine Henin, if you start with a one-handed backhand early, what happens is, she said, you lose a lot. I don't think there's an answer on what one should do. It depends. If someone is going to compete and they're wired for success and they're going to get so discouraged that they may not play tennis, then I would say for that player, I'd want them to do it in a backhand. But if someone understands through maturity and through parenting, coaching, that no, I can play the one-handed backhand, I'm going to lose some, but in the end, I'm going to play a one-handed backhand. I've had players change from a two-hander to one-hander in back, and that's been a positive because now their two-handers better, they're more versatile with adapting and hitting the underspin backhand. But when it comes down to if a player is going to change, I think it's really up to the player. I've suggested to players, hey, why don't you think about making the change, let me know. I've had players come back to me and said, well, no, I'm not going to change because I thought about it, and for me the return serve is more important than the approach shot based on my game style. I've had people come back and say, no, I'm going to change because I see myself being a player who goes forward and primarily having my success in doubles. So, again, the ball doesn't know whether it's being hit by a one-handed player or a two-handed player. So sometimes too much is made of it. Either way, you can hit the ball great, and either way, you can be very successful. But that's just a few thoughts on one-hander versus two-hander.